Okay, we really need to start with the Italian Serie A, which is, for me, the most eye-catching of the leagues because, as we know, from the last few seasons, anything can happen at the top, So let's start with what's been happening. Inter have not been firing on all guns, and then they put 6, past Lazio. Will the real Inter please stand up?
I think they just did on Monday night. And I think the fact that the schedule made us wait until Monday night for this huge game between Lazio and Inter, it's quite difficult to pick. You're thinking, okay, Inter, with Atalanta having taken the lead in the league and looking really good, Inter really need to show their mettle now. And you thought, if they can get a result, this would be a great statement of intent. We didn't imagine a statement of intent just like this. 6-0. They were absolutely fantastic. We've known all along that they have got the best squad in Serie A by some distance, and that they're the best team in Serie A, arguably the best coach in Simone Inzaghi, who has proved now that he can go and win the league and that they've wanted to build on that. But it has felt as if they've played within themselves a little bit during the league, and they've dropped the ball in the big games as well. So you think of the 4-4 with Juventus, you think of the home defeat to Milan as well, which, you know, statistically is what's stopping them being top. But it's also that sense of, will this best of teams be able to prove themselves in the biggest of matches? And look, Lazio have been fantastic so far. You know, they're in the top 5, but it's so close that really underrates how good they've been so far this season. And this was Inter saying, all right, no more mucking about, here we go.
Were Inter really that good? Because the game I saw, I thought Lazio were pretty poor.
I thought Lazio were poor considering what we'd seen from them prior. I've said in this show before, I thought Lazio were a bit of a dark horse in this title race. And I actually thought going into this game, they're not somebody who Inter wants to face. I think out of all those teams who are in the running for the title, you can pick apart them all. But I think with Lazio, I thought they're the most gritty team in there. They're the ones who could really frustrate Inter. So for Inter to put on this performance was especially impressive. It was quite I thought it was a very defiant performance as well. This was an animal with its tail up. I think they'd heard a lot of criticism, and if you look at Inzaghi's comments after the game as well, I thought they were, a bit out of sync with how he usually approaches things. He was very like, okay, now you've seen us, no, just remember us who's the top team in Italy. Remember who we are. Remember what we've done. Remember what we've achieved. And this was a really emphatic performance, and you could see the game face was on for all their players, and they were absolutely flawless. I thought, look, Lazio were poor, absolutely, but look, Inter were that good.
Yeah, and I think Lazio really started to fall apart as they sort of lost hope really after the third goal.
After the third goal, you really saw their heads drop.
Yeah, I think that's the case. But that sort of defiance that you were talking about from Inter, I mean, you think of, of course, they didn't beat Napoli as well. We're talking about the big games that they haven't won, where Çalhanoğlu missed his first ever penalty, where he hit the post. And the first penalty he's taken since was the one that opened the scoring at Olimpico in this game. And the way he just smashed it in and then grabbed the ball and smashed it up in the air was like, what? How dare you defy me, football, sort of thing. And like everything about what they did was so emphatic. You look at the Denzel Dumfries goal, where the jump is Cristiano Ronaldo-esque, how far he gets off the ground. It's amazing. Here was a team that was just in perfect synchronicity, really. And sometimes I kind of feel that they've been muddied by the fact that they've got so many options, and particularly up front, their options this season and last season are better than the options they had in the season that they got to the Champions League final.
They've got Udinese in the Coppa Italia this week, and they'll put up 6 or 7 changes in that 11. They'll have an all-new strike force. Probably Arnautovic will be up front with Taremi as well. And it's just the depth and the ability to change things that they have is remarkable.
Well, you look at the team that they beat Arsenal with in the Champions League.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when we're on the show with Nicky Bandini, there seemed to be a bit of a perception in Italy that they were perhaps focusing more on the Champions League. Their record in the Champions League this season has been fantastic. And I think they just needed to put this performance on to remind people. And Inzaghi did say that. And just on Dumfries, just one thing, by the way, I noticed he's got 7 goals in the last 2 seasons in Serie A. And there's only one defender who has scored more, and that's his teammate, DiMarco. I mean, that just goes to show. And the wing backs were very central to this performance.
Yeah.
Lazio could not cope, and everybody knows how Inter are going to play. Those two fullbacks, and Dumfries and DeMarco, are both going to be placed really high. Lazio couldn't handle it at all.
Although, as you've already alluded to, Andy, they're not top of the league, are they?
No, they're not. And although they could be, because they're a game behind Atalanta with 3 points behind. They've got better goal difference, as you would expect, particularly after this. But yeah, we shouldn't underrate what Atalanta have done so far. And especially since, if you go back to the beginning of the season, when you look at the injuries to Scalvini, Scamacca, the departure of 10 Koopmeiners, which was really protracted and caused a degree of upset in the squad, Atalanta shouldn't have been able to do what they've done. And that they have, I think, underlines, well, not only what an amazing coach that Gasperini is, if we're talking about best coaches in Serie A, I think a lot of people would argue for him, but also how smoothly things run upstairs in the club, because they were able to go out and do more of a makeover to the squad than I think they ideally wanted to. Yeah. I think you look at the team that won the Europa League, also that won the Europa League with a perfect performance against the team that was the best team in Europe last season in Bayer Leverkusen in the final. They're brilliant. Of course, Lookman was another one who looked like he might go and didn't in the end in the summer. And so that I think it says a lot about A, how well they recruit, and B, how well Gasperini runs things, that it could have been a mess. It could have been turbulent. And the first few games were a little bit stop-starty before they really, really found their stride, as they have done recently. But that they've settled down into a team that has not only been really good, but maybe better than they've been before. I mean, it's an enormous testament to everyone at the club and how well they know their jobs, really.
I thought they were fantastic against Real Madrid. I think that's one of the best Champions League games I've actually watched this season against Real Madrid.
Great.
And they were beaten, but I could have easily been 3-3 or 4-3 Atalanta. The last 30 minutes or so from Atalanta, when they were trying to claw back, when they were trying to come back, was just brilliant to watch. The way that they play, and I thought it was them in a microcosm really, really well. The fact that they were down, but they didn't change the way that they played. They still played their football. They still built from the back, still very patient, lots of composure. Fed Lookman. They couldn't do it. They were putting 3 people on Lookman at sometimes, but he was still getting through and just pinging that ball right across the area and just causing absolute panic stations in the Real Madrid penalty area. And I have a special admiration for teams who do that, who still stick to their style, even in those moments when they're behind as well. They could easily start flinging balls up at the top. Rettigui's a battling striker. They could easily have started flinging balls to him, but they didn't. They continued to work the ball. They continued to move, pass and move, and they're fantastic to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have pinned that defeat on Retegi because he misses that chance right at the end, but that's really unfair. He's been so good for them throughout this season. And I think he's an indication of how healthy the environment at Atalanta is, because I think you look at Retegi, and when they bought him, I thought they're spending quite a lot of money on someone who's just like a quite good striker there. But of course, with better players around him than he had at Genoa, he's absolutely flown. And I think in the second part of the season, how he gets on will be really interesting, because A, can he maintain this pace? And B, because, and I suppose the Real Madrid one was a case in point, when they won away at Napoli was a case in point, where he scored the last goal right at the end, but he didn't start the game. Gasperini hasn't started him for the biggest matches. And if you're Retegi, that must really annoy you. And I guess it's the feeding on raw meat theory, isn't it? Is it going to come to this point where he puts him in from the start of one of the big matches, and Retegi's like, right. I'm going to show you why I should be in this team from the beginning, because the way that Gasperini has managed his resources so far, as you say, David, has been absolutely expert. I wonder if there's something even more to come from Retegi because of that.
I think so, potentially. And I think at the moment he's just kind of seeing Retegi as like, he's a brilliant player to have on maybe last 20, 30 minutes against tired legs. Because he is just so aggressive in the way that he plays. He's a nightmare for a defender. It's kind of like, oh, right, I've got a break. He's gone off. Who's coming on? And you see Retegi coming on, and you're like, right, I'm going to get taken around here. So yeah, I think we might see. And again, look, Gasperini's a smart guy. That Atalanta squad is, I think there's a nice depth there as well to go all the way in different competitions. So like Andy says, we might see him starting soon.
Well, they're unfashionable, aren't they, Atalanta? And I mean, this is what's so fascinating about the Serie A at the moment, because we've been through this before. There are so many teams that could possibly win it. If you're Atalanta, though, and we'll maybe come back to Lookman in a moment or two, it's worth just mentioning him in a moment. But if you're Atalanta, looking at the way that Inter demolished Lazio, and given that game in hand that you mentioned as well, Andy, if you're an Atalanta player, do you feel confident that you can withstand, the reappearance of Inter into the mix?
I don't think they need to feel anything, because they're not expected to win the league at the start of the season. In fact, at the start of the season, people are probably looking at it thinking, okay, Juventus have re-upped, Milan have re-upped, Napoli have gone and got Antonio Conte. Are we even expected to finish top four, especially with that forced turnover of the squad that we were talking about? So look, they've been brilliant. I think where they are in the league is not an unfair reflection of how good they've been this season. They've been exactly that good. And I think, given that a few key players are new, there is room for them to get even better. But there's no pressure on them to go and win the league. Now, as David was saying, that is true. Of course, they are at the top, and you don't want to lose that. But I think they'll have quite a realistic handle on it. Like, can they go and win the league? I think they've shown in the first part of this season that they can go and win the league with a fair wind. But I think this week as well, and David was talking about the way that Inzaghi reacted, which was like quite uncharacteristic for him. It's like, come on, man, have respect. We are the best team in this.
and they are, and they're still favourites for me.
Yeah, they are. I agree. Yeah. And I think to assume that, and to sort of put themselves in the position where they would become the first team since Juventus's run of all those successive titles, one to retain Serie A. And like you said, Dom, it's what makes it so good, and it's what makes it stand out amongst the big European leagues, that there's this sense of jeopardy. Now, obviously, Inter are trying to eliminate that. They're trying to get past that. And I think, we've looked at all their forward options, and I think Taremi's been a great addition to give relief to Lautaro, because Lautaro had a ridiculous year. He played deep into the Copa America and to the end and all the rest of it, so he barely had any rest. And you certainly saw that at the start of the season. To spare him, to spare Marcus Thuram, all of those things are important. But I think the thing that will win into the league is their defence. You bear in mind, in that game they've just lost against Leverkusen on the last round of the Champions League a week ago, that's the first goal, like in the 90-whatever minute, they conceded that goal to Nordi Mukiele. The first goal they've conceded in the Champions League this season.
It's extraordinary. And to show you just the sort of pressure that's on Inter, about a month ago, they just beat Arsenal in the Champions League. They were still unbeaten in the Champions League, and I think they were about 2 or 3 points off Napoli in the league. People were saying, "Oh, this has been a disappointing season for Inter." That's what they've created for themselves.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Adebayo Lookman. So one of our own. I'm speaking as an addict, obviously.
Did you call him Adebayo Lookman?
Well, Ademola Lookman. Thank you very much. Ademola Lookman. One
you
of
steal
our
him.
own.
I mean, that's fine.
That's fine by me as well. But he must have his tail up. He's been awarded African Footballer of the Year just this week, and well, that's no mean achievement. There are a lot of contenders there, as you know.
There's a lot of very strong competition there. So he's won that. 14th on the Ballon d'Or rankings as well.
Wow.
What a phenomenal year. And what a turnaround in his career as well, which is wonderful to see. I think after that infamous Panenka penalty miss against West Ham, of course, I think West Ham were leading 1-0. Panenka penalty from Lookman at the death, misses it. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, this kid's not going to make it. That's a terrible mentality. And it's lovely to see him turn around.
He's really obviously used that as fuel, hasn't he?
I mean, that and the Everton spell.
First thing he put on social was like a sort of split picture of him playing for Atalanta and him missing that penalty against West Ham, wasn't it? So it's not that it's. I don't think it's so much that it's like other people are still thinking about it. He's still thinking about it.
Do you think the huge improvement in his form, or at least in his efficiency and ability, is down to Atalanta, or to what extent?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it. I mean, his first loan spell at Leipzig, he did really well, and then when he came back, Julian Nagelsmann just didn't really get him, I think, which was a bit of a shame. But look, I think, Gasperini's made a massive difference to him, as he's made a massive difference to lots of other players.